All right. Good evening. Good evening. We are live on Instagram. We are live. No, not on Instagram yet. Give me a second. It takes a minute to go live on Instagram. We're definitely live on Facebook and YouTube. Didn't realize tonight is the night of the Oscars. I'm so out of the loop. So I will watch it back on. They play clips on YouTube. But welcome to another podcast episode of Crime by Michelle. This is episode 8. That is very hard to believe. We are on episode 8, and tonight's episode is called "The Conductors of Destiny." And I'll speak more to that subject and why we chose that subject. So basically, before we even get into that, I always believe in going to church announcements. I'm also live on TikTok. You won't be able to see my speaker, but you'll be able to hear my speaker, my guest speaker. So I do want to give you all a few church announcements. Something I actually posted on Facebook today. I am in the process. For those who don't know, I do what is called All Black Author Book Drive. Hold on. There we go. I do an all Black author book drive where I collect books by Black authors and give them out to different communities. I'm literally sitting across from my kitchen table and there's like bins of books waiting to go out to some awesome young kids. I do have some books for adults, but for the most part, I have books for kids. Number one, if you're a Black author, you want to donate towards a cause, you can email me. I will put my email in the chat and then I will put my website up. But I need some place to give these books out. So if you know someone who's having a community event, preferably in Columbia or within 20 to 30 miles of Columbia, I would love to come out and distribute these books for free. Depending on how many books I have in the crowd, I usually give out 2 or 3 books, but it's to build up their library, to promote literacy. And sadly, when it comes to the book bans, those are the books that are being taken off the shelves. Most of that was written by us. Our next episode is supposed to be tomorrow with Janae Marks. She informed me she is not feeling well, so we're going to have to reschedule. So once we reschedule that author chat with Janae Marks, I will definitely let you know when that will be. So our next episode will actually be with Keisha Lewis. She helps people who are struggling with diabetes try to get their diet, try to keep it under control, hopefully get off of medication. I believe if you have diabetes, or you have a family history of it, or you just want to know how to avoid it, I think you should join in our podcast, that episode, which will be March 4th, which is Tuesday at 7:00. We are breaking down sugar because I think we don't understand how much sugar is in our diet. And I think this will be a great discussion to have with her. Next thing, reverse. We are finally to the final stages. Actually, I was trying to log on to Copyright Gov this morning to register my book, but it's acting funky. So basically, this is coming out soon. So if you have not pre-ordered Reverse, please do so as soon as possible. I will definitely talk about that book at another time, but definitely pre-order by the 10th, and you will get it in your mailbox by March 10th. But it's a preteen love story loosely based on my life. And then another big event that's coming up in Columbia, South Carolina, that I'm truly excited about is called the Read Freely Fest. It is sponsored by our Richland Library. They're going to have what is called an Indie Author Hour. I will be there. Again, it will be at the Richland Library, main one downtown off Assembly Street. It will be March 28th through the 30th. They're going to have authors come in from around our world and our country, but they reached out to their indie authors, or their local indie authors who we live here in Columbia, and we're going to have a space where we can sell books, talk about our books and whatnot. So I'm really excited about that event. So tonight, I have an awesome guest who we go back to 98. So we literally used to hang out together. I remember we formed a group called Me Fight Jiggy. So you remember that? I think your mic is turned off, Amber.
I remember.
So, but I have watched this young lady as we have grown up together. We both have children, and we both at one point were teachers. And I have watched her talk about her books that she came out with. A beautiful, beautiful woman. I love the relationship she has with her family, which includes her sister, her mom, her husband, her 2 beautiful kids. And she wrote books that help moms navigate in a space that we sometimes underestimate how powerful we are.
Yeah.
especially as women of God, especially Christians who, if you believe you have been filled with God and can do all things, there's certain things that we can do that I think if you're not in a word-filled church, you're going to totally miss. And let's be honest, what's crazy is there's some people who are not even Christians, but they believe in manifestations. So, so if you believe in all that, then I believe this podcast is definitely for yours, for you to listen to and tune in. Is there anything you want to add to that introduction, ma'am?
You said it all and you've said enough. I am ready to begin and kind of share my story and how I got where I am. And just know that the admiration is reciprocal for sure, my
Thank you
friend.
so much. So what took you to the place that when did you discover your power as a mother? Let's still with that. And then when did you realize I need other moms to know this? And you made the book. So I guess when did you discover your power as a mother?
That is a great question. When I first put my finger to the keyboard to write for somebody other than me in my journal, it was back in 2019. And that's when I began a blog. And I was really unsure about what I was going to do with this blog. I just knew that I had a lot on my mind and a lot on my heart, and I needed to get it out. And it wasn't just for me. So I just started to type and publish, type and publish some of the things that I had gone through, some of the things that I was going through. And one of the very first blog posts that I published was about my experience with postpartum depression
Mm.
and having to overcome suicidal ideations after I had my son. I told that story reluctantly
Okay.
because I still had a lot of shame about it, but there was such an urge on my spirit to write about it. I did not know why, but I just kind of went with it. I obeyed that prompting, and the battle that I fought was from about 2016 to about 2018. It was about a 2-year battle. I had to really acclimate myself to being okay to getting help in the mental health area, and doing what I needed to do to stabilize myself mentally and emotionally so that I could show up as the mother that I needed to be. And I pressed publish on that blog post telling about that story. And a few days later, my mother reached out to me and she said, Amber, I read your blog post and I just want you to know that I experienced the same thing with you and your sister. And I
Mm.
think that my mother experienced it with me and my sister too. And this moment for me is a core memory now because I had so many mixed emotions in the moment. One of relief because I knew I wasn't alone. I didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel like I was walking this path by myself. It was just me. Why are all the women around me so strong, but I'm not? And in fact, that wasn't true. They just weren't talking. The other feeling that came along with this is a little bit of irritation because I was really wishing that I had known this
Mm-hmm.
before the battle had to be confronted. So I realized then that I had power as a mother. I never questioned my power as a mother because I have a great relationship with my mother and my grandmothers, aunts. So I'm thankful for those examples in my life. Also, church mothers, and I've had really good relationships with the mothers of the Lord in the church.
Mm-hmm.
I at this point in my life had already become a bonus mother to my oldest, or my bonus girl who's now 23. Whew,
Mm-hmm.
geez.
I remember when
And
I got married, how old she was. Oh my God.
yeah, I met her when she was 5, and wow, we've grown up together, and she's such a blessing. And because I was an educator, I knew the importance of the role of the mother from the lens of my students. And so the power was never something I really questioned. But what I found out when I decided to write about my experiences in motherhood is that there was power in my pen to break off the negative things that I was facing in motherhood. And then
Mhm.
what that was allowing other people then to also have that same breakthrough through the conversations that those writings brought up. And that is when I really stepped into a different level of power in motherhood. And that's when I approached it differently, because I knew that parts of my path were for me to share with others,
Mm.
especially mothers.
Okay, so I'm trying. I wish I had my pen and pencil because there were several things that you said. I'm like, I need to
You can
go
go get
back.
it. It's okay.
So, but the one of the main things that you said, and I'm sharing with our audience too, never think you're at this alone. Like that is the biggest misconception of the enemy, where he really wants you to think you're the only one dealing with this, you're the only one coping with this, you're the only one who is navigating this space, when there's so many other people who have gone through what you've gone to. What also leads to my next point is it's very imperative for us to be transparent and open, because we never know when we're open with people that will cause other people to be open. And the fact that your mom admitted she went through the same space, um, but it took you being vulnerable, even though you were scared of being vulnerable, you opened up that part of what you were feeling, and that caused her to be open. And that's when you realize there's definitely a need here that needs to be addressed. So
Mm-hmm.
I do believe sometimes we do have to go through things and advocate by ourselves, sometimes to a point, but eventually we are meant to share that experience and share either while we're going through it or after we've gone through it, because there's so many people that need to hear our story. And you may not decide to write a book like Amber did, but nevertheless get into a space where you can share with other people, because the reality is so many mothers, like when the more you were speaking, I kind of wonder if I went through that with Joshua, because I did struggle with suicide ideation. um he might have been 3 or 4 months old.
Yeah.
But how I internalized it was I was struggling financially. So that was my way of trying to escape that. So I remember, through poetry and through writing, I was able to get out of that space. But I wonder if something more was more to that. And it's just one of those things. I think for me, I was a single mom. Even though his dad was there, I was home by myself. I was, getting
Yeah.
up and doing the feedings and whatever and whatnot. So it just makes us wonder, which makes me think of another podcast episode we need to discuss, because I think a lot of new mothers don't know if they are in that space and what that looks like. So thank you for bringing that up. So from the blog, how did we get to the book?
Okay. So I started to go on this writing journey in my blog, realizing the more I wrote, the more I got to write about. So I really just began to let that process flow. But I knew from that experience and conversation with my mom that I did not want to repeat the cycle with my children. So I began to think that I needed something to pass on to them, to give them the advantages that I wish I had had, the wisdom imparted into me from my mother ahead of time, or at the right time, at least. And so I began to work on the book that I published second, actually, called A Journal for the Generations. And that's right there. That's what the cover looks like right there. And I was working on that, and that turned into a devotional journal that is topical. So it has 15 topics, and it's got space to write for 3 generations. So it's something that can be passed on with the writings of the people from who you want to hear from later in life, or if you want to pass it on to your child. But I was doing this while I had my second child, my daughter. She was a beautiful surprise. We did not know she was going to show up. And I was really in the thick of my career. I was a literacy coach at the time at a kindergarten through 8th grade school. I absolutely love that job. I really believe in teacher advocacy. That's a passion of mine. And so I enjoyed that job very much. When COVID began, I began to feel the strain and stress that every educator did during that time.
Mhm.
And I had my daughter maybe 3 months after the world shut down.
Mm.
And I had my maternity leave. And when I went back to work, I quickly realized that there wasn't a grace to be there and that I needed to be home with my daughter for a lot of reasons, for my own physical and mental health, which I was much more aware of this time around. And because this particular child of mine was a difficult baby, she had a hard time sleeping, eating, all the things. And
Mhm.
so unexpectedly, I got the sense in my spirit that I needed to come home and
Mm.
be a stay-at-home mom with her. And that was one of the hardest transitions I've ever had to deal with.
Mhm.
And I was dealing with that all while taking care of this baby that was really inconsolable. And I wasn't used to that because my son was not that way. And the way my mind is wired is through words. I'm a word girl. I
Mhm.
love vocabulary. I love poetry. I love prose. I love the scripture, and I like I look up definitions regularly just because that's how I think. And I was rocking my baby girl in her rocking chair one night as all these other things are going on around me, as I'm resigning from this career that I really loved, as I am writing a book from that blog experience that I'd had back in 2019. And I kept thinking about the word consoled. Like, why can't I console this baby? And
Mm.
I opened up my Bible and I started to look up the word consoled because I was looking for a scripture to stand on or a prayer to pray or something because I was kind of at that point of desperation with her. I was so sleep deprived. And, I had had a baby at 40. I hadn't planned on that. And so it was just a totally different experience. And I needed a word. I needed a
Mhm.
word. And so I ended up going through and doing a topical study of the word console in the Bible and went down the rabbit hole really quickly. And I realized that there was more to this word comfort and console in the word of God for us, for all of us, but for mothers, I picked up, especially in the moment. And I got this strong sense as I was reading all these scriptures with the word console in it, that the same way I was trying to console my child, that there was a part of our relationship with our Father in heaven where he desires to do that for us too, if we will
Mhm.
let.
Yeah.
And so I began to write down what those scriptures said and how God shows up in this way for us in our lives. And I'm seeing it as this parallel, like I'm trying to comfort my child while he's trying to comfort me, and we all just rejecting the comfort. And so I I ended up taking that to my journal. I ended up writing it down, and because the educator in me rarely sleeps, I was looking at this and I thought, this is not just some notes I'm taking on an idea that I got when I was praying while I was holding my child. I was like, this is like a study. And so I from there began to create this 7-step devotional journal on the 7 ways God will show up to console you according to his word. 7 different
Mm.
ways, not ways, 7 different. There's many ways. We don't put them in a box, but at least 7 ways that I've discovered. And I took that concept that he was showing me as I was in my word and in prayer that God was showing me, and I rewrote it through the lens of weary mothers, of tired mothers. And so I came up with the book Consoled right here. And this is a short but sweet and powerful book that takes tired moms, and you don't have to have a, I mean, you could be, we could talk about 5 months or 25 years old, a tired mama. It doesn't really matter
Yeah.
because that part doesn't really ever go away. Um,
No.
yeah. And you could be an energy in your body, but your soul can be tired, your emotions could be tired. But if you're dealing with weariness in the area of motherhood, I've written this micro study through the word about the word consoled for tired mothers. and how you can believe for the Lord to show up for you in that way, to comfort you in a lot of the same ways we want to comfort our children, so that we can have the strength for that journey. And so that book was kind of like, just like the surprise baby, it was like a surprise book. It wasn't, I didn't plan for it. I was working with a publishing company like I was for Journaling for the Generations. But I found that what I needed, again, I wrote it down and put it in a form that other people could see, because I
Yeah.
wasn't the only one who needed it. So that's how that book was birthed. And it actually came out in 2021. And I've found that it has helped more people in more ways than I even saw or even anticipated.
And one thing I forgot to do before the beginning of the podcast, if people want to follow your journey and learn more about you, is it Everything with Amber? Is that the handle for IG?
Yes.
TikTok?
IG, okay. Facebook, and TikTok, Everything with Amber.
All right.
And
So
YouTube.
I'm going to put that up so they can follow
you
and have that up there. So I don't know how I forgot that. I always have that. So that is so on point, because I mean, one thing I will say, and the reality is that we sometimes forget, not even forget, I think sometimes we just don't know the magnitude of who God is, that when they say Lord of everything, that doesn't mean necessarily control sometimes, and that he has a plan for you, he wants you to follow, but he wants to cover you in all things. So if your heart is hurting, if you have a concern, he wants to be able to help you with that. It's just a matter of you opening your mouth and petitioning to him, and he will let you know exactly what you need to do, or just how you just need to be still, and he will handle it. So it's just one of those things where, even though I've been in this faith, I know over 20 years, really seriously, well, I want to say within the last 4 or 5 years, I'm more awakened to his power and just understanding the magnitude of who he is and what he wants to be in our life. And when they say live life more abundantly, I think some of us automatically think about finances, when the reality is abundantly and prosperity is, and he wants every aspect of our life to flourish. Everything. So how we are with our children, how we parent our children, how we are, do we have mental wellness? Do we have a good relationship with our family? He wants every area of our life to be blessed. And once we're open to that, the magnitude of what he can do is limitless. So let me make sure. Good. So Instagram, we said TikTok, and you say YouTube too, right?
Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube. That's all I can handle right now.
I've been flirting with because I'm hearing people talk about Substack. I'm like, do I really want to add another thing to my plate? So
I know.
So we will see. We will see. So again, Everything with Amber. You can follow on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Everything with Amber, and you can definitely, if you type in Amber Blakes, type the book cover, because I know when I typed in her name on Amazon, all these different titles popped up. But when I typed her name and the title of the book, one of the books is called Covered, and what's the other book called?
Consoled.
Type that in with her name on Amazon, and you'll see her titles. So they're definitely available. So so we talked about Consoled. So how did we get to Covered? Like where did that idea come from?
So that came from probably a walk that you're familiar with, my child starting kindergarten, my older child. And it also came from me walking away, at least for that period of time, the work that I was doing traditionally. And so I found myself being a teacher mom who was no longer employed as a teacher officially, but I was starting to walk that parent route with my child going to school. And there was just so much that I knew that I would look for, but I was really just trying to find a way to balance that, take the teacher hat off, put the mom hat on, and to not let myself or my son or his teacher go through any unnecessary pressure. And
Mhm.
so I took it to God in prayer. This was, and not that I don't do it now, but this was a really prayerful time in my life, if
Mhm.
you can't tell. And so I had a vision or an idea to take what it is that I did every day in school, when I was working with teachers and students, and write down every area that we would look for a child to develop in.
Mhm.
And because I was doing this was kind of, I don't want to say it was a selfish project, but it was for us. It was for me and my child and children. And once I did that, I felt led to go to scripture about each area. And so when I did that, it was really easy to craft prayer about each of those areas. And I really found that this was a strategic way to pray. It was very, very prescriptive and precise. And it gave language and vocabulary to parents who wanted to pray for their children and cover them in school, anywhere from daycare to college. It doesn't really matter what level of school, but wanted to do it specifically. It's almost like if you were experiencing an illness that you were being hospitalized for, and you researched everything you could about that illness and you prayed using that language. That it's kind of like it's that specific. And so when I finished writing covered, I began to write covered and I put it down.
Mhm.
I put it down because life lifed. And then there was the tragedy in Uvalde, Texas that
Mhm.
happened. And I knew I had to pick the book back up when that happened. That was a clarion call to me.
Mhm.
And so I really kind of burned the candle at both ends for a season and got it done. And I also included a part of it for journaling. So as you notice, each book that I have has a section for journaling. They're not journals alone
Mhm.
because they have chapters of text that are there for teaching or for prayer. But there's also a part for writing because my breakthrough came through my pen,
Mhm.
just as I believe it did for you too.
Mhm.
And I need for people to keep that going because their breakthrough is not going to look like mine, even if it comes through a tool that I've created.
Mhm.
So it allows parents to go through it's a 30-day prayer journal or a 30-week, however long you want to stretch it out. There's 30 prayers in there for a safe and successful school year. And that was something that I created because I felt like I wanted to ask God to work through my expertise, even though I wasn't officially in the classroom or in a coaching position because I was home with my daughter. I still wanted to use what I knew from my years of school and experience, but I wanted to give it a faith boost
Mhm.
and I wanted to write it from the heart of a mother. So
Mhm.
this book is really like a synergy of an educator, a mom, and a woman of faith,
Mhm.
helping others pray really specifically over their children when they send them to school every day. And that is how that came to be.
So, and help me out, and you might have said it, and I might have missed it,
Mm,
but these prayers didn't come out of like I shared with my, and I'll share that again for y'all. Like my prayer life and my confessions with Joshua came out of emergency. Like we saw an urgent need. Was this like, no, you just feel like, no, I need to cover my child and this is what I need to cover? Or did it come out of like urgency? And I know you mentioned what happened in Texas
mhm.
that prompted you to write the book. But when you started the idea, was it out of realizing you need to cover your child, period? Or was it like you saw some things like, God, we need to get this straight? What?
That's a great question. It actually was for me to
Hmm.
ease my anxiety
Okay.
because my son is and was a very capable young man, a very bright young man, but he was not me and I was not him.
Hmm.
He has a more laid back personality. He is just in the moment and he enjoys his surroundings. And I could easily see me allowing my career to overshadow my motherhood and to really pressure him into being like the teacher's kid.
Mhm.
And so I had to back up off of him
Mhm.
off of his teachers so I wouldn't helicopter parent. But at the same time, I had these concerns and I knew, it's tough when you know too much about a certain thing
Mhm.
to fall back when you see things not in order. And so, I mean, I intricately knew what letter he should know by what week in school. You
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? And how many sight words and how his number sense should be, and what his handwriting should look like, and how his behavior should be responsive. And it was one of those things where I was like, okay, I can't take everything I know and watch it not happen for my child the way I was trying to break control.
Mm.
I was trying to humble myself and give the control over the situation to the
Wow.
Lord. And so so really what it was to cover my children, but it was more a healing tool for me
Mhm.
so that I could take these concerns I had over my child beginning school
Mhm.
to the Lord and not to my child and his teacher,
Oh my
unless it was necessary.
That is mind-boggling to me because I know for me, for those of you who don't know my story, my son, extremely bright, extremely intelligent, very verbose. Like I remember we were playing a game and he was like, "I need to strategize a way to beat you." He was like 4, so but then when we came to first grade, we saw early some struggles when it came to reading. I remember he was in speech, but that was something
Mhm,
that immediately was corrected. But it
mhm.
got to the point that I remember his teacher saying he definitely is going to have to fail first grade. And I was like,
Oh.
"Damn,
Mm,
no." So we even had him tested. Like I don't have a problem.
mhm.
Like a lot of people speak against special ed. My thing
Yeah.
is nothing wrong with getting started in it, and when you realize it's working. And there are a lot of kids who test out of special ed. A lot of people don't talk about that. There are a lot of kids who once you
Yes.
get to a certain area, they are able to fully function or not have to go to the resource lab for a particular period. So I was open to that, but he did not qualify for that. So me and my mom, mainly my mom, Nana, number one. She and Joshua was her only grandchild. So she got him up
Mhm.
with Sylvan, any reading programs we made sure he was a part of, anything the district offered, he was a part of. So Joshua went from being told that he was going to be retained um, in first grade, which he wasn't. We also moved schools because I realized that was not
Mm.
where it's so important to be in tune to your child and to listen. When my child wakes up, is it the weekend? Because you don't want to go to school because you're
Right.
yeah. I was like, this ain't right. So I really regret that I did not move him mid-year, but I wanted him
Mhm.
to go into a particular program and it's like it's a magnet choice or whatever. So fast forward from first grade, it's okay, I'm doing well in math, but reading hits too hard and I don't want to be here.
Mhm.
Being told in fourth grade, "Oh, you're talented and gifted. You're in the top such and
Wow.
such percentage." But in between that, we put in the work. But we also, what I shared with Amber prior to us getting on the podcast, was our children's church ministry, which is phenomenal at Right Direction Church International. They
Mhm.
have a wall of confessions, and it's like
Mm.
I'm a rightly directed child. I'm proper and obedient. I'm quick to learn. I'm quick to understand. So me and Joshua would say these confessions on the way to school every morning. You would
Mm.
hear him, I'm quick to learn. I'm quick to. He was like, right, but when I say he got to a point, I never get third. I didn't know this happened. I knew this happened, but I didn't understand the extent of what happened.
Yeah.
Joshua in third grade was getting honor roll, and then it was one quarter he didn't get it.
Okay.
I knew he didn't get it because the teacher, the way she gave assignments was wrong, but I didn't really bat for him. I just let it go. But what I found out, Amber, when he was applying for scholarships, one of his scholarship essays, he goes back to that moment in third grade. And he said, because of that moment, he didn't make honor roll and he watched all his other friends get honor roll. That fueled a fire in him that he
Mhm.
would not let his grades slip ever again. To the point
Wow.
last semester, he made dean's lists. So he is just one of those things where, as I was sharing with Amber and I'm sharing with y'all, God spoke into existence this earth.
Yeah.
So the fact that she said, well, let me speak these prayers, and it just blows my mind when we really tap into what God, the power that God gave us, and that we can tap into, and what we can do
Mhm.
to help cover our children in prayer. Not saying that things won't happen, but that they're covered in the sense that sometimes we're able to escape some things, and sometimes we're able to get through some things that normally
Mhm.
we able to go through because we're covered in prayer. So that is such a vital tool. So, oh my gosh. So, what are the ages of your kids?
Our my bonus daughter is 23, and then my son is 9, and my daughter is 4.
He's 9.
He's
He's been
9.
that
I know.
long.
Oh, he's almost double
Oh
digits.
gosh.
Isn't that ridiculous? Oh my.
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. So,
Mhm.
what has been some of the reception you've received, and what what have you seen the power of this book do with other readers and other moms with both of the books?
Okay. The reviews are always nice to read that you get on Amazon. They really give you validation and affirmation that you did the right thing to create what you needed in a form that someone else can also benefit from it.
Mhm.
But what I found is that writing these books and also my blog posts have begun conversations, like really crucial conversations that may not have ever happened if I didn't put pen to paper
Mhm.
and put my words out for others to read. And some of those conversations have resulted in
Mhm.
tremendous breakthrough, because the conversations became generational.
Mhm.
And by that, I mean, people would come to me and talk to me about things that happened with their parents, their grandparents, things that they wanted for their children, things that they wanted for themselves. But because of what had happened in their past, that they felt hindered. And
Mhm.
so I began to have these like breakthrough conversations with people. And then what I began to notice is after we would have these conversations, they would launch into something really great. They would start a podcast, or they would go back to school, or they would publish a book, or begin a nonprofit. And I kept thinking to myself, okay, there's something to this. Like the Lord has given me my help, and I've
Mhm.
created something for others, but they've become conversation pieces that really have other breakthrough attached to them. And so I've begun to work with people, kind of a soft launch, like in consultations, to have
Mhm.
those type of breakthrough and breakthrough conversations. And what I have found the Lord has been so kind to do for me through these books and through these conversations, even though I have not returned back to work in any school district or in education officially yet, even though I've kept my credentials current just to be positioned for whatever
Mhm.
comes. He's allowed me to help people who have read my books share some of their personal experiences with me, and
Mhm.
then also show me places where they have experienced their own educational injury. And I think you can follow me on this, because
Mhm.
a lot of where people got held up as younger people that were keeping them from destiny, where, and I know I love when you called this title. Well, tell me what it was again.
Conductors of Destiny. Mhm.
Conductors of Destiny. I knew that was not an accident that was hindering their destiny. I was able to help them identify from my educational expertise what they had experienced, because when we have trauma growing up, a
Mm.
lot of us focus on parents, something that happened with parents, parental trauma, or siblings, or with other family members, bullying, those types of things. But we spend so much time in school
Say
as
that.
so much time in school, and a lot of our trauma has come from what has happened in those four walls, and we don't
Mhm.
normally associate it with how our destinies are hindered now. And so I am able to speak with people about their backgrounds and pinpoint where in their education they received an educational injury. At first, I called it an educational trauma, but I didn't feel comfortable with that term because I'm not a mental health expert. I'm an
Yeah.
education expert. But an educational injury or a wound is something that I think we've all experienced. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and it probably has wounded us from destiny in ways that many of us don't even realize, because again, when we think of trauma, we think of family,
Family.
home, church, those types, neighborhood, things like that. But not in school, because we kind of have been conditioned to think like, well, tough things are going to happen in school. Have thick skin, you'll be all right. And I didn't realize by writing these books, or writing at all, that it was going to lead me to work with the readers of my books through conversations and helping them to overcome their educational injuries, their generational challenges, and to actually take action on those things
Mm-hmm.
towards what they were supposed to do all along. It's
Mm-hmm.
been a powerful journey for me that has even taken on its own life, that I didn't see it coming. I
Mm-hmm.
just didn't see it coming. But
So
it's been
when you mention educational injury, can you give I guess a general example of something so we can help our listeners know what exactly, because I speak of advocating for yourself all the time. So I want to make sure we're thinking in the same vein, and I'll speak more life into that. So when you say,
Yeah, I'll give you one or two examples.
Mhm.
So, one of my readers that I spoke with, she was telling me a story about how she was always in the gifted and talented programs throughout school, and even so much to the point where she was considered for promotion, like
Mhm.
social promotion. So she was going to skip a grade.
Okay.
And she talked about how that happened for her. But from the moment that that happened for her at a young age, she felt this pressure to perform,
Mm.
because she had something to prove. Because although she was smaller, she it was sometimes even at a higher achievement level than the children that she was around, even though she had skipped a level. So she felt this need to dim her light so she wouldn't seem too smart.
Mm.
And it was just something that she definitely, it still weighed heavy on her, but in the present she was really struggling with starting grad school. And she's a minister, and she wants to work in counseling and in community. And when I was able to, because my second degree is actually in gifted education, so that's something that I actually have studied. And I was explaining to her some of the social emotional nature and needs that the children who have high academic achievement have, that often go unaddressed,
Mhm.
especially in communities where education has been oppressed, where
Mhm.
you just don't know what you don't know.
Mhm.
And when I was able to explain to her what she actually experienced, but what the truth was about her giftedness, as she was created by God, and how it was supposed to connect to what she was doing today, there was a breakthrough in that conversation. And she was able, after that, to freely apply for grad school.
Mm.
And then she started a podcast. I was
Mhm.
like, wow, this is really interesting. And I've also had people talk to me about comments that teachers have made to them, that those words um, lived on in
Mhm.
them, and have actually affected them as adults. And we work on forgiveness with that, and we work on replacing any truth with lies. I mean,
Mhm.
lies with truth. Excuse me, lies with truth about that, so that we can go on. And some people may not realize that in their career, in their vocation or their education, or in the legacy that they're supposed to document in the earth, a lot of times you don't get to those things, or you're
Mhm.
hindered in those things because something has happened to you in your
Mm.
educational journey that you need to process. And so I find that I've been able to help a lot of people do that,
Mhm.
and it's really set them free.
Oh my gosh! Like, so many thoughts came to my mind, but one
Mhm.
thing I'll admit I got better over time, but one thing I got very cognizant about is my words. I'm not gonna call you out of your name. I'm not gonna call you crazy names. I'm not gonna say you're not gonna amount to anything. I may say if you don't get it together, this will happen. So I need you to be smart about this. When you hear about people calling people stupid, I mean, the amount of things I have heard over time, and I eventually became that teacher where kids came to me complaining about things teachers would say.
Yes.
And I would let them know because I'm their colleague, I cannot go, even though I do realize I probably could have, but I would let them know, okay, what you need to do is you need to get with your parents. Y'all need to schedule a conference, or y'all need to send an email or do something to make sure parents are on the email. Speak up for yourself. There have been times that me as a teacher where I remember it wasn't intentional, where a child felt like I was disrespecting them. And it really was a clash of personalities. But I'll never get mad because I just saw her a couple of weeks ago. She's an orchestra teacher. And I'll never forget, it was in red ink. And she wrote out the letter and she said, Miss Jenkins, I felt like it was rude when you said such and such and such. So I remember I pulled her to the side. I said, I did not intend for me. That was not my intention. And I said, I will be more mindful with my tone. So if there are any young people in here or anyone has any young people, definitely pull them in my room or rewatch this with them. And especially if you're watching this in the replay on Facebook, and YouTube, definitely put hashtag replay so I know that you're watching in the replay. But nevertheless, she had enough boldness within her to say, I don't feel disrespected. And I think as students, we have to definitely teach our kids. And that definitely came from teaching from the home, because I have seen some parents where they were like, I don't care what the teacher says. I don't care how you go in that classroom, you act how you're supposed to act. Not realizing if you're feeling disrespected, it's hard to think. It's hard to process. So, and there was another instance where a child, she went to her mom. Instead of coming to me, she went to her mom. And then we had a parent-teacher conference. And it was a matter of, again, me learning my tone, learning how to say certain things. And then I was also understanding, and I had to change some things about myself. But there's nothing wrong with holding teachers and administrators accountable, because like I tell my kids all the time when I taught, we're here for y'all. Like, matter of fact, I was in a presentation last week and she said, at the end of the day, we forget that the stakeholders, the ultimate stakeholders, is not the community, it's our kids, it's our students. So what are we doing to make them feel comfortable? What are we doing to make them feel safe? And if they don't feel safe, can they feel comfortable speaking up without lashing out? Like, countless times I've heard from parents, well, I didn't want to say something because I was afraid that they would take it out on my child. No, it's called you say something. Yes, and I'm like, if they did take it out on your child, it's called, we need to go to the next level, because what you're not going to do is come for my child, and you're supposed to be the professional. Like, let's make it make sense. Because at the end of the day, teachers and administrators, we're professionals. So we like, I never understood. And I'll admit, I was that teacher at one point in time too, where it was like, well, I match your energy with I'm gonna match with the same energy. We're not supposed to clap back. Like, as professionals, we're not supposed to. Now, we have our moments where we may clap back professionally, you know, but as far as like a child comes at you crazy, so you come back crazy. No, that's not what professionals are supposed to do. So it's just like, it's one of those things where, again, parents, there's nothing wrong with speaking up for yourself. And the chain of command, I always speak of. You go to the teacher first. Then from the teacher, you may ask, well, can I meet with an administrator or a guidance counselor? And then y'all can have an in-person conference. Now, if that doesn't work, then that's when you want to bring the principal. Now, if that doesn't work, that's when you go to the district office. And I'm saying that because I have been on the receiving end. And the reality is, all the district office is going to do is call the principal and tell them,
bring you right on back.
They're going to bring it right on back down. They're not even going to deal with it, because they have principals at school for a reason. We have assistant principals at school for a reason, because your assistant principal deals with your grade level. And then if it's not the assistant principal, it's the counselor. So stop skipping steps, because you think that's all you're doing is causing more stress and trauma. But at the same time, don't be afraid to speak up if you feel like, no, this isn't right. And Lord knows, and I think that's an advantage of being a teacher. We know what to expect. We know what should be done. So when we see stuff as a parent, you're just like, no. And not saying you can't speak up for yourself, but I like how Amber shared the transparent moment where she didn't want to be that helicopter parent. She didn't want to be just, she knew her boundaries. So that's why she went to God in prayer, not saying she wasn't involved, Not
Mm-mm.
saying she wasn't there for her child, but just making sure I know what to pray for, so I'm not being anxious about
Yep.
what's going to happen with my child. And it was something else you said that I speak to a lot also. You said, he's my child, but he's not me. Can you speak? That is something that I constantly have been hitting on lately, that I had to learn with my son. He's my child, but he's not. Like, they have some characteristics, but they're not me. Can you speak on that and how to balance that as a parent?
Oh, that's such a good question topic. I'm glad you brought that up. You reminded me of something a good friend of mine said once, and I'll never forget. She said, "God does not have any grandchildren."
Almost dropped my cup. Girl, that's a word.
That's
That
my
is
friend.
a
My
word.
friend. Shout out to my friend Angelique, a beautiful woman of God and prophetic voice. She said that your children are His children too. You know, it's not just like there's no hierarchy there. Like, you are not in that hierarchy. So, you know, slide to the side
Mm-hmm.
and let me parent them the way I need to parent you. Um, we are co-laborers in this thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so your child is half of you, they're half of someone else, but they are all of who God created them to be.
Say that.
And although, yes, I can empathize and sympathize with my son sometimes because we do have like characteristics. And I will tell you what, for those of you who have children, you know, if children are in your future, you will know you will have no trouble finding the characteristics in your child that are just like you. They will be very evident. You will not have a problem identifying them. They will be there and you will know it. Um, and so, you know, I began to reflect on my own journey and things that I had wished had been done and wished hadn't been done. And the fact of the matter was, I did do well academically in school, but I didn't do so well emotionally in school. I dealt with a lot of anxiety. And I thought to myself, well, you know, do I want that path for him? And I was able to take some of these things in reflection and prayer. I was able to differentiate between like his physical needs versus my physical needs, and um his social needs versus, and then of course too, it's a son, it's not a daughter, you know, so there's the gender differences. And so again, so thankful for the role of my husband and other men in our family, uncles and the grandpas, all those great guys who step in for our boys to help lead and guide him. But he isn't me. And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to make sure that I was co-laboring with God and not putting myself in his seat in my son's life, because I can't. I don't have what it takes.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't. I've tried, um, and it begins to affect my own emotional and mental health. And so that's why I've had a really, you know, when I finally got to this place of having children, because I did have some years of infertility. That's a whole nother story. So when I finally got to this place in my life, I was really uh, enthusiastic about not messing it up,
Okay.
to the point where control became what I was experiencing rather than allowing myself to co-labor with God, with the children that He blessed me with. So, um, this time of prayer and writing
Mm-hmm.
really were like deliverance for me. And it really helped me to give like something tangible
Mm-hmm.
or in concrete, something I can hold in my hands,
Mm-hmm.
to a tool, a
Mm-hmm.
tool to kind of like not only just help me not push myself on him or live my life through him, but take it to God in prayer or put it in this pen and paper and, you know, and let you and the Lord sort this thing out,
Mm-hmm.
and him to guide you and how to help raise his son.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to really get checked in that area. That was
Oh
a
my
definite
gosh. That
getting.
that is, when I say that is so good, and this is one of those things where I never get watching, I don't know, it was a podcast excerpt or whatever, but with Shaki Hill Perry talking with her husband,
Mm,
and how they were saying how they had to learn how to, this is God's child. and he gave it to us to steward and to raise them up the way God wants them to be, not how we want them to be. And I love how you shared, Amber, how not inflicting your will, your wishes, what you want, but just what does God have for this child? What does God want to do through them? And it's one of those things, y'all, when you get that form of release, it takes off a lot of pressure off of you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just when you realize that, and I shared this story several times, how when Joshua was able to drive and had a car, he was adamant he had to have his own money. My thing is I'm thinking about me as a teenager, how I was working, I was running track, I was in school, and my grades were like kind of subpar. So I was like, nah, you don't need to. I was like, you don't need to work. Like, you don't have to work. He's like, no, I really want to work. So when he finally got a job, I said, okay, we'll let it go. But if your grades slack, you're going to have to cut back on some things. And when I say my son did the doggone thing, like even now, when I think about last semester in college, Joshua was on Dean's list, but on the weekend, he wasn't doing a whole bunch of party. Joshua was working. Every now and again, he would hit up a party, which I found out very quick when he came home. This is a boy who went off to college. I ain't pledging. So coming home, yeah, mom, I think I'm a pledge. I'm like, you seen some things. So, but the point I'm trying to make is, even when I shared with him my first semester GPA, so even though me and Amber partied together first semester, I did not. Amber, I will admit, you and Carrie and it was a few other, y'all did a very good job of balancing your grades. I did not. So I ended the semester, I think, with a 1.5, which is like a point away from academic probation. So I shared that with my son, who he ended it with a 3.5. And he was like, what were you doing? So it was like, again, he's very intelligent.
Social media.
Yes, his father was very intelligent, who is very intelligent. And then for those of you who know what I'm doing, my iPad is acting stupid, so I'm getting it straight. So it was like he had the balance of these two intelligent people. His dad was very driven in school. He used to cut up and be funny, whatever. But the point I'm trying to make, y'all, is that sometimes when we do give our kids rules and restrictions, are we giving them because this is really the best interest for our child, or are we thinking about how we used to be and we don't want them to repeat those same mistakes?
Ooh.
And it's like, at the end of the day, we have to remember this is still our child, but that's the child that God blessed us with. And we also have to ensure and make sure, am I parenting my former self or am I parenting my actual child?
Ooh.
And that, when I say I have to remind myself constantly about certain things, when I want to say certain things to Joshua, and I'm just like, well, Ryan, think about that. And and that's why having a prayer life is so instrumental, y'all. When I say it's so when you cover your child in prayer, Joshua will make jokes about it because it was some meme, some video how a woman busts up in the room and she's all loud, speaking in tongues and putting the oil. And I said, Joshua, number one, I'm not that loud. Number two, I'm thinking you're sleeping. He's like, no, you wake me up because the way you press your finger on my forehead. But when I say he has been part of a friend group, I think since second grade, they've been together. They all are in college right now. They all excel academically. None of them got in any, I mean, not saying they won't do any knick-knack thing, but as far as getting in trouble and their parents feel like they got to choke slam them, they're all really good kids, which I think is a blessing that not only did he surround himself with good people, he stayed on the good path. And I know that's attributed to prayer. So again, if you have not already, if you're following, you can follow Amber Blakes on Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook under Everything with Amber. You can access her books. One is called Consoled, and the other one is called Covered. By Amber Blakes. You can find her books on Amazon. She has been on other podcasts and interviews too. And matter of fact, while I was talking to you, I'm gonna get with my ministry leader later. I'm gonna get with them first to see if they're okay with the idea. But I would love you to bring you to our church. So I have to get with her. But we have a ministry at our church called MAM. It's called Mothers Assisting Mothers. So we meet. Yeah, so we meet every other month or every other quarter where we have like check-ins, and sometimes we have in-person sessions. So just to bring you in and talk about your books and your journey, that will be a great, awesome discussion. So let me get with her first because I know
I
she
would love it.
but if it's not this year, eventually I would love to bring you in because people underestimate, the power of prayer and what that can do for our lives. And another thing I want to bring up that Amber brought up, writing, y'all. If you don't have a way, I believe in therapy too, but I know my therapy started for me when I journaled. For those from your old school, it was a diary. So just writing out those feelings and really getting them out. And matter of fact, when I was dealing with suicide ideation, and with my pregnancy with Joshua, it was a poem that I wrote. It was like, I must live for. And I started just listing all these things. It was me through writing. And sometimes my poetry is a form of journaling, but the thing is I still write to get those feelings and those thoughts out there. So I'll admit our time is up. So this is not going to be the last episode that we do together, Amber, because it was so much more to unpack. Again, you can follow Amber on TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram. Under everything is Amber, and YouTube. I forgot to mention YouTube. She's on YouTube too, so follow her too. You can find me on all social media platforms. Ryan N. Jenkins. That's my website. If you haven't already pre-ordered the books, pre-order books. So Amber, I'm gonna put up a few other banners too, real quick, before, but don't go anywhere. So I'm trying to think. Oh, where am I? Where am I going? Okay. Oh yeah. So we literally have 50 million books coming out. So reverse is coming out on the 20th. I know it says the 7th on the flyer. That's an old flyer. I do apologize for that. But I want you to see all 3 books. A Blessing for the World, which is a love letter to our beautiful Black sons. That is out now. That is available everywhere, but you can definitely order it through me. I just placed an order for 50 books, paperback and hardcover. My next children's book, which is a love letter to our beautiful Black girls, is called Heaven's Jewel. That will be out in April. We don't have a set date yet because my illustrator is still working on illustrations because she is a freshman at Howard doing her doggone thing. And then Reverse is my first novel, which will come out. I'm aiming for March 20th, but I have a feeling it will come out earlier. But if you want to get your autographed copy by the release date, you definitely need to order by the 10th. And then our next podcast episode will be with Keisha Lewis. On Tuesday at 7:00, we're breaking down sugar. Please know that even if you don't think you have issues with sugar, I still want you to tune in because I'll admit I'm delaying it, but I need to go get a physical because the last time I got a physical, I was told I was inching towards pre-diabetic. And that's something that runs in my family. And I have cut back significantly, but I still need to go get the physical done to see the evidence and see what more work I need to do. And I realized too, through sugar, we don't realize how much sugar we're consuming. So let's say you have an orange juice, you have 50 million sodas. Sodas alone, y'all need to stop. So I literally have been cognizant where if I have sweet tea for one meal, I won't have any other sugary drinks that day. I may have green tea, which I love, Publix brand, or I'll have water. That has changed for me significantly. And I also realized that being a former teacher, I don't have my access to my candy box anymore. So my candy box was stacked and loaded from Twix to Snickers, and I was inhaling most of it. But yeah, yeah. So I'm doing better though. I'm doing better. And then the next book, I haven't talked about it a lot, but this will be my next book that will come out in, I said April, but I'm still working on it. So we're probably looking at May. This is going to be my last poetry anthology, I think, for the year. I really want to focus on fiction and nonfiction. So Eminence will be the next one. It's basically speaking to our power to overcome, to be a great mother, to be a great wife, a great couple, to be a great person overall. And that's what Eminence speaks to. So tune in again next time on Tuesday at, oh gosh, I forgot the time already. I think it's 7. Yeah, 7:00. Again, the episode with Janae Marks, which if you have not read Janae Marks' book, she has one book. The first one is from the desk of Zoe Washington. Is about a 12-year-old girl who on her 12th birthday receives a letter from her father who's been in prison. Come to find out, he's been writing to her all this time, and then he admits to her, I didn't even commit the crime they said that I committed. And so it's a wonderful story. There's a sequel to that story, and she wrote another place called A Soft Place to Land, which I'm excited to talk to her about. A Soft Place to Land, because that book really does show you how parents, your kids see everything. In the book, the main character, their parents are going through some financial difficulties, and is a parent and how they talk to each other, how they interact with each other. And this 12-year-old is internalizing all of that, and how she dealt with that wasn't the healthiest thing. So it was a great read. So I greatly appreciate y'all tuning in. This will be up on Facebook and Instagram for the next 24 hours, and it will be on YouTube forever. And then when we are done, I will definitely download the episode where you will access it on Apple Podcasts, Amazon, iHeart, Spotify, and Podcast Index. You can listen to the audio. So I greatly appreciate y'all tuning in, and I will see y'all on Tuesday.